In this episode, we talk about the murder of a 7-year-old child who was on her way to school in Gujarat's Dahod district. We also talk about the first case to be registered on the basis of the Justice Hema Committee report. But first, we talk about the demand to end government control of Hindu temples. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Ever since the Tirupati temple controversy first came to light, with allegations that adulterated ghee, including beef tallow, was being used to make their famous laddus, there has been a demand by right-wing groups to end the government's control over Hindu temples. Right now, virtually all significant temples in the country are controlled by the government.
They are controlled in the sense that there are boards and trusts which have representatives of the government in it. Some boards have chairmen from the government. So there is considerable influence of the government in running the affairs of these temples, at least the administrative affairs.
That's Indian Express's Deeptiman Tiwary.
They do not interfere in the religious affairs, like they do not control who will be the pandit in a temple, who will do the prayers. That is an affair that the community or the temple manages. But administrative affairs as to how is the upkeep of the temple going to be maintained, how is the pilgrimage going to be regulated, the safety, security. Then the most important thing is the offerings that come. The donations that come to the temple, how are they going to be accounted for? How are they going to be used? So there are various acts that different governments have in the country. Basically, management of temples is in the concurrent list. So both the center and the states can make laws.
So several states in the country like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Kerala, Maharashtra, Odisha, Himachal Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan all have special laws for the management of temples.
So through these laws, these boards and trusts are created in which there are government representatives or the chief of that trust is chosen by the government. For example, even the Tirupati temple, which is currently in controversy due to allegedly adulterated ghee, is also managed by a trust whose chairman is appointed by the Andhra Pradesh government. It is the Tirupati Devasthanam Trust. So similarly, several states have these laws and trusts, and a part of the offerings, which is where all this controversy actually comes from. This all centers around the wealth that is in possession of these temples. So a part of these offerings, wealth that comes into the temples is given to the government, or the government takes it and uses it for secular purposes, such as opening schools, colleges, hospitals, and educational institutions which offer secular education. So those kind of things, basically matters of public welfare.
He says the amount of income the government takes from temples varies from state to state. For instance, in Tamil Nadu, this portion is about 7 to 10%.
So it's not like the government is taking all the money, because see, the upkeep of the temple and the administrative affairs also require a lot of money. Okay, there are salaries to be paid to the people who are managing the temple and the temple administration. These are operational costs. Then everyday expenses of the temples can be quite high.
This includes everything from cleanliness and upkeep to maintenance, extensions, and even the managing of parking spaces. Now, the reason organizations like the Vishwa Hindu Parishad are demanding an end to government control over temples is because the places of worship for Muslims and Christians are managed by their respective community-run institutions, boards, and trusts.
I mean, there are ways in which the government interferes in their affairs as well. Okay, for example, one could argue that the government is bringing an amendment to the Waqf Board Act. That's a government interference, one may argue. Or there have been Waqf properties which have been acquired by the government. Urban Development Ministry has acquired them in Delhi. See, there are provisions in the constitution which grant right to religious freedom. And this right to religious freedom, which comes between Article 25 to Article 30, it has various provisions which in different degrees provide what kind of freedoms various religions have.
And the right to profess and propagate your faith is of course equal to all religions. But there are provisions, he says, which grant certain privileges to minority communities.
such as Muslims, Christians and Parsis, which have been interpreted by the courts in a manner that grant them this protection from excessive government interference in their religious matters. So you have something like the All India Muslim Personal Law Board, which has been granted certain privileges by the constitution itself, and certain other provisions in religious matters. So those come together to grant them certain privileges over, say, Hindus, Sikhs and, Buddhists, Jains, over them in managing their religious affairs.
Now, when it comes to the government control over temples, Deeptiman says it actually started during the British Raj.
See, we all know that, once upon a time, temples were the centers of civilization. In the Indian context, it is around temples that cities grew up. So they were not only centers of culture, but also centers of economy. So when the Britishers came to India, they realized that this was not just a gateway to socio-political influence in the society, but also repository of great wealth, which could be used for purposes that they deemed fit to be used for.
And so during the early 1800s, they enacted a series of laws, largely in the Madras and the Bombay presidencies, which gave them a right to interfere in the management of temples.
However, the first specific law with regard to Hindu temples came in 1925. This was again colonial India. And this was through the Madras Hindu Religious Endowment Act. But, there was this opposition to this arrangement from within the British establishment and from among the people who were at that time following Orthodox Christianity. They protested it, saying that why should Christians be, managing or maintaining Hindu temples? But after independence, independent India did not think that this was too bad an idea actually. And it was informed by 2-3 things. Obviously, one was the temples had considerable wealth, which could be made to use in a country which was essentially poor. 2, Hinduism is a very casteist and hierarchical social structure.
So the governments of that time thought that unless they controlled temples, marginalized sections of society would not be allowed to enter them. And the only way to ensure this would be through government control of temples, administrative control. And let me clarify one thing here, that in independent India, through provisions of the constitution and through various acts, this administrative control has been limited to only secular matters of the temple and not religious matters of the temple. So that distinction is very essential. Though, of course, there have been arguments that every aspect of a temple is inherently religious. And so the two are not exactly separate in nature. So again, then in 1951, there was this Madras Hindu Religious Charitable Endowments Act, which actually provided for this government department, which is called HR and CE in Tamil Nadu. And it has since then, this department has been managing temples. And several other southern states have their own departments or have their own acts, which give them considerable influence in matters of temple management. So that's how the government control over temples came into being and continues to be so to this day. Deeptiman says the demand to end government control of temples dates back, at least on record, to the late 1950s. In 1959, RSS apex decision-making body, the Akhil Bharatiya Pratinidhi Sabha, passed a resolution in this regard saying that Hindu temples should be handed over to the community. Then there have been resolutions in this regard throughout various years. Later, in 1988 also, a similar resolution was passed where it was said that this was essentially discriminatory and that when other religions manage their religious affairs, why shouldn't Hindu community do so? And Vishwa Hindu Parishad has been raising this issue throughout the 70s, and in 2021 it even passed a resolution in its Faridabad meeting demanding that there should be a central law to free temples from government control. So it has been a long-standing demand, and since the Narendra Modi government came to power, we have seen this demand coming from the BJP as well. We all remember that Trivendra Singh Rawat government in Uttarakhand had enacted a law which took control of the Char Dhams. Then there was massive protest against this, and Pushkar Singh Dhami government in 2021, when it came to power, it repealed that law.
So there have been demands to this effect. Even Prime Minister Narendra Modi has, during the Telangana elections campaign, he alleged that the Tamil Nadu government was controlling all the temples, Hindu temples.
साउथ के अंदर खास करके तमिलनाडु में मंदिरों पर सरकार का हक है। सरकार ने कब्जा कर लिया है। मंदिरों की संपत्ति को सरकारी मिलीभगत में हड़प किया जा रहा है। मंदिरों को तो लूटा जा रहा है, मंदिरों को तो कब्जा किया गया है, लेकिन माइनॉरिटी के पूजा स्थल को हाथ नहीं लगाते हैं। सरकार के नियंत्रण।
However, despite all this, the central government, even under Mr. Modi, has not brought any central law to actually take temples out of government control. And many BJP ruled states as well, or where they are in coalition with others, they continue to have considerable control of temples. In Bihar, BJP is in power with and has been in power for a long time with the JDU. Government continues to control temples in that state.
He says over the years, there have been legal arguments in favor of freeing temples from government control, and the matter has been challenged in the courts as well.
But more or less courts have been, and including the Supreme Court, they have been very reluctant to actually do something about it. Basically, they have sort of batted for status quo with some modifications, granting certain freedoms to temples to manage their affairs, but have largely sided with governments as far as their control over temples are concerned, and have had sort of a view that this is not a matter that the court should be legislating over. This is something that you go to the government and you deal with them. And as latest as 2022, BJP spokesperson and lawyer Ashwini Upadhyay had filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court to free temples from government control, but the apex court argued again in favor of status quo and said that the current system is working well and the temple funds are being used for secular purposes, which is fine. And it said that what you're trying to do is you're trying to turn the clock back, which is not required. So after that, Mr. Upadhyay had to withdraw his petition.
And next we talk about the murder of a 7-year-old girl in Gujarat's Dahod district that has shook the local community and has made them lose trust in the word teacher. The incident took place in a remote village of the district. When we spoke to Indian Express's Aditi Raja, who has been reporting on the story, she told us that it was on the morning of the 19th of September that the 6-year-old Class 1 student and her mother left home for school.
As usual, they walked from their house to the curve on the road where, children in the village would usually stand on that road and wait for cars of teachers to pick them up, as is the practice in the village. So, like any other day, with her mother, she walked down to that road and they were waiting. The first car that came on that road was the car driven by the principal of the school. And as the practice is, he stopped, the mother waved, he stopped, and she sent the 6-year-old into the principal's car, assuming that, he would take her to the school, which was about 750 meters from her village. Little did she know that this 750 meter usual journey would be her last, and she would never make it to school and the family would never see her again.
She says her family started looking for her at around 6 p.m. after all the students except the girl had returned to the village. Many of them arrived in the cars and on the two-wheelers of the school teachers.
When they inquired, their neighboring children told them that the girl had not actually even come to school that day, which left the mother very surprised. And that is when the family also contacted the principal who had taken her in the morning. And according to the family, the principal just told them that he had dropped her off at school. She attended the prayer assembly early morning and thereafter he doesn't know where she was. That's when the girl's mother asked her father and her uncle to search for her. And the search took them to the school, which was already locked.
They had to jump the boundary wall to enter the premises. They started looking for the girl, and it did not take them long to discover her body in the backyard of the school.
which was this, a space between the school building and the compound wall where she was lying unconscious. That is what the family assumed. They picked her up in their arms and, drove her down to the local public health center on the two-wheeler where, the doctors on duty immediately even attached the oxygen mask and referred her to the referral hospital in the district, the taluka head of that particular village. That's where they actually learned that she had died much earlier. And it was as if the world had turned upside down for them because the 6-year-old was their only daughter. And the only reason why they were sending her to school was because they wanted her to study until at least class 8.
She says the family was completely taken aback and were trying to comprehend what had actually happened to their daughter.
From there, the police immediately took off the probe where the SP himself reached the spot, which is quite a distance from the district head. The Dahod Superintendent of Police, Rajdeep Singh Zhala, himself visited the spot and started the probe. It was only the next day that the primary postmortem report revealed that the cause of death was asphyxia due to smothering, which is when the police registered a case of murder against an unidentified accused. For the family, the only question that they were asking the following day was who did it to our child and why did it happen? And it is only when the police actually began investigating and putting the clues together that they were led to the principal.
She says once the investigation began, the police followed the last seen with theory, which ultimately led them to the principal.
The police was very meticulous in its investigation, although the police said that the principal tried to mislead them by being a part of, the initial team of people who were helping out the police during their probe in the school premises. However, because she was last seen with him, his statement was first taken down in which he said that he had dropped her off at school and she even attended the prayer assembly in the morning. And thereafter, he doesn't know where she was. When they verified the statement of the principal with the version of the other teachers and the students in the school, they found out that nobody had seen the child in the school that day. She wasn't even, present at the prayer assembly is what the teachers told the police. She wasn't there when the midday meal team was distributing milk after the prayer service, as is the practice in the school. And nobody had seen her getting off from the principal's car that morning, although the parking area is just a 25 by 25 square meter area, which is what, really gave the police a clue that she probably never made it to school. Although her bag was found in the classroom and her slippers were found outside the classroom when the family had discovered her body later in the evening that day, she was never present in the class. And the class teacher also told the police that her bag and her slippers were not there in the classroom during the day.
And this is what made the police further question the principal, who, according to them, kept changing his version of events.
Details of which they have not shared because it is a sensitive investigation. But eventually he did, confess to his crime, and that is when the shocking details were revealed. The most shocking part of this crime was that he had basically tried to allegedly rape her and tried to force himself upon her, which is when she resisted and started screaming. And because it was a short route to the school with many other children traveling along the way, he allegedly smothered her to quieten her and left the body in his car for the entire day while he went about his work and his, usual routine in school. The car stood in the parking lot with the body of the girl right until the evening. And only after the school dispersed and the other staff members and children had left, that is when the principal went back to his car, retrieved her body, carried her body in his hand and dumped it in the backyard of the school, is what the police probe has revealed so far. Even during the reconstruction of the crime that took place about a couple of days ago, they have reconstructed the entire sequence of events as being the way the probe has so far found.
She says that investigations have also revealed that while the police were searching the school premises and the principal was present with them, he had sent his car for washing to a location about 50 kilometers away from the village.
Because the girl had apparently urinated and vomited in the backseat while she was being smothered in her last minutes. and he probably wanted to erase the evidence. And the police also used technical surveillance to investigate the location of the principal and found out that he had taken longer than usual to reach the school that day. And after picking up this 6-year-old, he did not stop on the road to, take in any other children, although he could have, and he usually would have also taken in another few children to travel with him. He took longer than usual to reach the school, and even when the school dispersed, he first claimed that he had left the school premises at 5 p.m. But his mobile location indicated to the police that he was present in the campus well after 6 p.m. And that is what led them to interrogate him later, during which he confessed to having committed the crime.
Aditi says the incident has shaken the family and turned their life upside down. In fact, since the incident came to light, not only the family, but the entire village has lost trust in teachers.
A lot of villages there, look up to teachers, and because these villages are located in a very remote area with, access to just a single government primary school in that particular location, they do send children, as usual practice, with teachers who travel by cars. It has been happening since several years in almost all the villages. But this particular incident has now shaken the trust of people, and they have, resolved jointly not to send children alone to school.
And she says even for the teachers of the school, this incident has caused a lot of distress and awkwardness.
Because teachers themselves say that they wouldn't have expected a principal of the school to, be involved in a crime like this. And it has definitely tainted the image of teachers among the minds of these villagers, where, getting children to school itself is a task. One of the major attractions of coming to school for these villages is the midday meal. And as the family has told us, they are not ambitious about education. When we met the family, they told us that, they kind of regret sending her to school, because if she was not enrolled in the school and, she wouldn't have had to travel with the principal, she wouldn't have met such a fate. The grandfather, who is into farming just like her father and her uncle, said that, I have never been to a school, and I have survived. I have raised my family with my farming skills. Maybe I should have just made sure that she learned, to live her life without getting an education, because in any case, we were only planning to send her to primary school until class 8. And if we knew that it would mean losing our child, we would have probably never enrolled her into a school.
Meanwhile, she says that after the principal was taken into custody, the local bar association of the court, where he was to be produced before the magistrate, refused to defend him.
They passed a resolution that no lawyer attached to the bar association of that local court would appear and stand in for this accused. And he chose to argue his own case on that particular day when he was remanded to police custody. Thereafter, he was also remanded to additional police custody because the police has said that he has been uncooperative during the investigation, and they also need to conduct some deeper investigation into his past and his character traits to understand if there are any other cases that could have been reported against him but have gone unnoticed.
And in the end, we talk about the Hema Committee report. After the Kerala High Court directed authorities to thoroughly review the entire Hema Committee report and take action if any offences are identified, the police yesterday registered a case against a prominent makeup artist. This artist was named in testimonies provided to the committee by women working in the Malayalam film industry, detailing allegations of sexual misconduct. This marks the first case to be registered on the basis of the Justice Hema Committee report, which was released last month and detailed problems faced by the women of the industry. Earlier this month, the High Court had come down heavily on the state government's 4-year-long inaction in the matter. The court had directed the government to hand over an unredacted copy of the report and all related documents to a special investigation team. The team had so far been dealing with allegations and complaints that came in the aftermath of the report's release, but were not directly taken from the contents of the report. Last month, after the report was made public, we had spoken to Indian Express's Pooja Pillai about it.
Since the committee was formed primarily to investigate the conditions of women working in the film industry, that is its main focus, although it goes into several other areas which are also pretty dispiriting reading. On women, there is extensive harassment. There's a line in the report which says that every woman in the film industry is familiar with these two words, compromise and adjustment. And this is particularly disheartening to hear, because what it shows is that every woman at every level, even before she has entered the film industry, when she's just looking for a job, when she's just asking for a role in a movie, has to encounter sexual harassment. It goes right from the junior artist to the biggest stars, is the indication that we see in the report. There's another phrase used in the report, which is late night knock on the door, where when women are on film sets, they often find that late at night, crew members or cast members or whoever's associated with the film will demand to be let in to their room. And the report says that these are not soft or polite knocks. These are like, sometimes it's banging on the door, and the women fear for their lives often. This is just this part, about the sexual threat that women face in the film industry. But then there's also the part, which again is pretty horrifying to read, that there is no provision for separate toilets. There is no provision for separate changing rooms. Women have to hold the urge to urinate for hours together. Many of them don't drink water through the day. Several in the report have said that they have even ended up in hospital because of infections that they have got as a result of this very unhealthy practice.
Right, and the other big thing that the report mentions is that the industry is dominated by a powerful mafia that allows these things to happen.
Yes. So the mafia has been rumored to exist for a very long time in the Malayalam film industry. And it's not just the women talking about it, it's also the men. What they say is there is a group of men. There's a group of men that includes actors, producers, whatever, who are very powerful, who will control everything that goes on within the industry. If you say something out of turn, if you say something that displeases them, then they may unofficially ban you, in the sense that they will probably call up a director that you're working with and tell that director, listen, if you're working with this person, I'm not going to work with you, or so and so is not going to work with you. So that works as an unofficial ban, and this has resulted, they claim, in loss of job for many in the industry. Like, many have left the industry, and generally people at the junior artist level end up not going back, if anyone dares to speak up about the malpractices within the industry.
If you wish to know more about the findings of the report and the reason why its release was delayed, you can find a link to the entire episode in the show notes. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.